What it do? Yo man, listen. Today, I want to talk about Commander Farsight in Tacticus. Let's get right into it. Now, Nandi recently made a video. I will be putting the link in the description. Essentially, in this video, he talks about his trip to the Snowprint's HQ. He interviews the developers. They give a lot of really cool information regarding Tacticus and whatnot, the future of Tacticus. However, at the end of the video, Nandi mentions that Snowprint had indeed have plans to include Farsight in Tacticus as the sixth playable Tau at some point. I find this really exciting, and I want to talk about it. Now, for basic info, for those of you who don't know, Commander Farsight is a character from the Tau faction. In previous editions, he did have his own sub-faction within the Tau Codex. It was called Farsight Enclaves. Essentially, the way Tau usually work is they don't live for very long, and they shoot you from a distance, and it is what it is. They don't engage in glorious melee combat because they think it is extremely barbaric and not cool. Farsight, on the other hand, he's like, hey, I found this cool, like, little relic sword that steals the life of my enemies, that's extending my life, and I don't think the Etrials are cool, so I'm just gonna, separate from the Tau Septs. I'm gonna make my own Sept, which is the Farsight Enclaves, and I am going to engage in glorious melee combat, and I'm gonna be all about getting up in your face. Now, his detachment does reflect this, whereas every single Tau detachment is mostly about keeping at distance, picking off enemies, firing and fading. Commander Farsight's detachment is all about, I'm gonna get up close and personal. I am going to gun you down with increased damage when I'm closer. Now, I do want to look at the datasheet because I always think the datasheet is important. I did post the 9th and 8th edition datasheets as well at the bottom. You can find them on Wikipedia. I'm going to talk about 10th edition specifically because of the fact that between 8th, 9th, and 10th, there isn't that much of a difference. Now, looking at this, he does have reasonable melee. It's good, you will be perfectly fine with this melee against most targets. As for his shooting, he has had 2 shots for, years at this point, 2 high-intensity plasma rifle shots. In 8th edition, it's rapid-fire 1, but that's essentially 2 shots. He's good shooting. This is anti-elite infantry, where, you want to target Terminators and heavy intercessors and whatnot. Those are the ideal targets. He does provide a really strong buff for the allies, where if you are within 9 inches of an enemy, you do get +1 to the wound roll. This is extremely good. This completely warps how, damage output works for Tau. This is a really strong buff. I can't overstate how good this is. Now, one other notable thing, he is a battle suit. He is not a stealth suit. The difference being Revas is a battle suit and Commander Shadowsun is a stealth suit. Stealth suits are weaker, as you know, Shadowsun is quite frail, but they are faster, whereas the battle suits, they are, a little more durable. Now, stat translation to Tacticus, I do think he's either going to have 3 or 4 movement. Personally, I think because Revas has 3 movement and Commander Farsight is also a battle suit, he's gonna have 3 movement. However, I would absolutely love it if he had 4 movement because I think Commander Farsight should rock. As for his melee attacks, I think he will have at least 3 melee hits. I don't see him having 1 or 2 melee hits. That would make no sense. Personally, I would like if it was 6 because if you look before, he either has 4 attacks with really good strength, really good AP, really good damage, or he has 8 very weak attacks. Personally, I would like 6 attacks. It will be nice. As for his ranged, I think there are 2 different approaches Snowprint can take. Either Snowprint can give him a ranged stat of 2 hits, which I will not like, or they could adopt the approach they had with Karn the Betrayer, where Karn does have a ranged attack on tabletop. However, because it breaks Karn's interactions with Ragnar Blackmane and whatnot, it's in his active ability, so he doesn't have a ranged stat. I think it would be quite nice if Commander Farsight's ranged attacks were baked into his active ability or his passive ability, so that he could be taken in Ragnar Blackmane comps as well. I am all for the same character being usable in different compositions. I think that's fun. As for size, because at the end of the video, Nandi did mention, oh, Snowprint has been wondering about the size. They've been, working on it. There are a lot of discussion about like, oh, what about the size? What about the size? I want to put into perspective. We do have a Killacan, which is Snapper Rekka in the game. It has a 60 millimeter base size. We have Abaddon the Despoiler. He's standing on his tactical rock. This is a joke for tabletop players. Don't worry, you don't have to get this. He's also standing on a 60 millimeter base, and Farsight is also on a 60 millimeter base. So as far as their bases go, they're essentially the same size. However, what I think, and I have no confirmation of this, of course, is spillage. Now, what do I mean by this? I put Macer on the right side of your screen here. As you see, he's standing in his hex. He's, pretty small. He's not that big of a model. And his weapon is just kind of spilling here. Snapper Rekka is similar. His weapons are spilling and whatnot. Whereas we have Revas in the middle. This is a Crisis Battlesuit. Look at how much she's spilling onto other hexes. This really muddies like when there are multiple units in engagement, because her left gun is like covering a good chunk of the left hex. Her right gun is not that much. Her the top of the chassis is spilling like almost half of the hex above her. So I think that might be an issue. However, Snowprint art team is always incredibly good at their job, so I really don't worry about this too much. And I put the guy here because you can see he's spilling. Not that much, though. Translation of abilities. Now, personally, I think his passive will most likely be a buff. This is because of the fact that Commander Farsight has mostly had incredibly strong buffs for like the last half decade. I reckon that he will probably not buff melee, because he's a Tau after all, right? Tau is all about shooting. But then again, Farsight is more close range. The reason I'm mentioning this is because something like Revas only has two range on her range attack. And, you either do range attack, if you get closer, now you're in melee. So how will that work? Because remember, close combat weakness reduces your damage by 50% when you're in melee. Maybe he'll do something to remove close combat weakness. That might be interesting. However, that does really depend on how good Tau is at that given moment, right? Because, removing close combat weakness as a passive ability, that's flavorful, that's makes sense, but then again, you really shouldn't be getting close combat weakness on your characters. And Darkstrider already does that. As for his active ability, as I mentioned, I think the 2x range attack damage is pretty cool. It's difficult to guess because, as you know, there are a lot of abilities in the game that are just active ability, hit enemy really hard. As I mentioned, Macer has something like that with his active ability. The Terminator for the World Eaters faction, he has something like that as well. So it's difficult to guess. Personally, what I would like to see, and this is based on nothing at all, right? Like I'm just predicting here. Personally, what I would like to see is, 4 movement, 6 melee attacks, ranged attacks are baked into his active ability, and then some sort of buffing. And I would hope that the buffing either buffs Tau well, and then other factions less well, so he could be taking other teams. I'm a big fan of Farsight, so I would really like to see him good. Now, I do really like Tau. I understand my channel avatar is a zoanthrope, which I masquerade as a neurotrope just between. I've been told that Draupnir has made 108 videos and he's been lying to us. Wow, unsubscribe. I'm unsubscribing. What a guy. I thought it was a neuro. No, it's a zoanthrope. It's fine. No, but the joke aside, I really like Tau. I have around, I have 98 games or something crazy like that in 9th and 10th edition combined. It's a lot of games. And it's safe to say that I'm a huge fan of the faction. I play every single faction, but I always have a soft spot in my heart for Tau. And I really hope that Snowprint does justice to Farsight. I want him to be good. I want him to be meta. I often say Karn the Betrayer is one of the best, implementation of the character in Tacticus. And I do mean that. I think Karn the Betrayer is amazing. I really hope Commander Farsight gets the Karn the Betrayer treatment and is not like something Patromine, right? I don't want another Patromine in the game because I'm very disappointed with the character. I would really like Farsight to be good and usable and just not another character where you unlock him and just never touch him and he's always at stone 1. Anyways, that's the video. Thank you very much for watching the video. Have a good day and stay safe.